To me, Jesus lived the ultimate example of being generous. Think about it for a minute. He shared everything: his time, his energy, his passion, and of course, ultimately, his life. Join me for an experiment this week. Keep your eyes and your heart wide open. Maybe even pray, "Hey God, help my life intersect with an opportunity to be generous." Maybe it's coffee with a friend, an opportunity to give to a cause, give to your church, give from your heart, give from your wallet, give from your time. Let's try it.
Hey, boys and girls, I hope you've had fun with your palm branches. I hope you're still waving them with mom and dad. I'm sure they'll love that. So be sure to keep using those throughout the week as well. But palm branches are lots of fun, and you've got lots of activities as well in the coming days that Miss Julie will continue to share with you every single day online. She's been doing a great job. So moms and dads, I hope that you've been excited about that and utilizing the ways that our children's ministry team has been helping your kids grow in a relationship with Jesus. Hey, again, we want to welcome everybody online. So if you're coming from the website, be sure to sign in. If you're coming to us from Facebook, be sure to comment. We always love to interact. There's several folks online interacting with you, and so we want to encourage you to do that from Facebook, and be sure to share it as well. Well, friends, it's hard to believe. Here we are. It's April, right? Golly, we've been into this thing some 3 weeks or so, and yet it feels like an eternity as we've been in isolation and as we've been sort of distancing ourselves socially. But the one thing I want to offer to all of us is, God is still with us. God is still for us. And we get to celebrate that as we gather together on a day like today to celebrate God's presence, Jesus entering into Jerusalem and celebrating His precious gift of life everlasting. But I want to share a story with you. Several weeks ago, it actually feels like months ago. It's hard to believe, but it was the weekend of March the 15th. You may recall that weekend just 3 short weeks ago. Kay and Sadie and I were on a staycation down in Dallas, and we were trying to do all kinds of things. Gradually, everything started closing. Literally, one by one, the domino effect started taking shape, and it was hard to fathom where we could go or what we could do, and it was actually a little scary. But we determined we were going to go out to eat because back then, 3 weeks ago, you could still go do that. And so we went down to Trinity Groves. If you've never been, I want to encourage you to go. It's right over the Trinity River, of course, right over the Margaret Hunt Hill Bridge. There's a great place called Trinity Groves with lots of restaurants, lots of stuff. We ended up going to a place called Souk Kebab House. Amazing Mediterranean food. And we made reservations because, of course, if you go down to Trinity Groves, normally you have to make reservations. And so we made them. It was Friday night, clearly a normally crowded time, but we got down there about 7 o'clock. There was no need for our reservations. We were literally the first of only about 3 couples who were there in the restaurant. The manager was delighted to see us. He greeted us at the door. He found a great table for us. We sat down. We ordered some amazing food. It was a great event. It was sad to see so few people, but it was great to get such wonderful attention from the wait staff. And man, while we were eating, there was this amazing food that we had. I'd never had anything like it. It was a kind of a sweet tomato relish. Didn't taste anything like tomatoes, so if you're not a tomato fan, you won't care. But if you love tomatoes, you'll love it. Anyway, it was a great accoutrement to the meal. It celebrated with us, and we had a great time with it. And then as the meal was over and we were ready to leave, we stopped by the door where the manager was and, kind of struck up a conversation. And I said to the manager, because he had nothing else to do, it was not crowded that night, I said, "Man, that tomato relish was amazing." I said, "Do you guys sell that by the jar or anything like that?" And he kind of got a big grin on his face, and he got all excited, and he said, "Hey, wait just a minute, will you? Just 1 minute." And Kay and I kind of looked at each other, and then he went inside. We were outside, and we just kind of waited, and then he came back and he brought us a nice little container of the relish. He said, "Here, just take that. Don't let the cook know that I took it." And I was flabbergasted. I was like, what a generous thing to do. What an amazing offering. I was fully prepared to pay for it. And he said, no, we'll just give it to you. And I said to Kay literally that night as we were driving home, I said, "Man, that guy was so grateful we were here. Wasn't it amazing that he gave us that?" And I said, he gave it to us as a kind of a marketing tool. I get that. But he also trusted that we would come back, that was a generous gift that would engender within us the desire to return. And I guarantee you, we're going to go back, right? Not only was that food great, but His generosity was a phenomenal gift to us. And as I reflect on that, I reflect on this reality that generosity as a spiritual practice, I think it's based in the two very things that that man did that night. He was grateful that we came, and so he gave us something. He also gave it to us because he genuinely trusted that we would come back. And I think that's what generosity as a spiritual practice kind of generates out of. I think it comes from gratitude, and I think it causes trust in God. We are grateful for everything God's ever done. We're grateful for all the things that God has and will continue to do. And then we trust that God's going to provide for us, and thus we offer generosity. It's a fascinating thing, isn't it? Man, I'm so glad we went to that restaurant that night, and I'm really glad we were able to have some of that tomato relish. You know what we did the very next day? We shared it with some friends. Now, this is long before social distancing, right? But we got together with friends, we shared it. They were astounded by the beauty and delight of that food. I want to suggest that God's generosity causes us to want to be generous to others because we're grateful and we trust. And God's generosity is amazing. And I mean, golly, we could go all the way back to creation. God putting out everything for us, laying out the lands, laying out the sky, laying out the heavens, laying out the animals, offering us all of the beauty of creation. God is amazingly generous. And then I think back of all of the promises that God made, the promises to Noah, and that there'd never be a flood again, the promise to Abraham that He'd make him a father of many nations, the promises to Moses that I'll bring my people out of the slavery into the promised land. All of those promises, tremendously generous, right? And then we get to Jesus and God offering God's only child in order that we might have life. And it calls up that powerful verse from John chapter 3:16, right? For God so loved the world that He gave His only begotten child, that whoever believes might have everlasting life. I don't know that anything could be more generous than that. And so as we step into Holy Week, as we acknowledge Palm Passion Sunday today leading us to the cross and to the resurrection, we begin to recognize that, man, God's generosity is powerful. And it's not only about the birth of God's Son and the life and the teachings of God's Son, but it's also about the tragedy of His death and the power of His resurrection and the gift that He offers of everlasting life. It can't get any more generous than that. And so this Sunday, as we begin that journey towards the cross and towards the resurrection and the empty tomb, I just am reminded of how powerful and generous God is. That God not only birthed love into the world, but God offered love on the cross so that we might live, so that we might have everlasting life, so that life might become abundant if only we would choose to believe. And then I reflect on not only how generous that is, but how it calls us to be as generous as God. At least try, right? At least make the attempt that says, man, God has been so generous to me. God has offered me so much in my life. God has given me so much. I know in these times of COVID-19, sometimes it's hard to reflect that way. But I want to suggest that our faith calls us to that and claims for us that powerful opportunity. So I want to turn to a passage of Scripture in Luke. Remember, we've been in Luke throughout all of Lent. I hope that you're reading through that gospel like we recommended at the very beginning. I hope you're almost to the end because Lent's almost over. But there's a story in the 23rd chapter of the Gospel of Luke that paints a powerful picture of both the generosity of Jesus and the generosity of a stranger toward Jesus that makes all the difference in the world, that comes out of gratitude and causes trust. Now, you may recall, Jesus comes into Jerusalem triumphant, and everybody's raising their palm branches, right? And everybody is excited that He's coming, and so they wave those palm branches, and then they welcome Him, and then those same voices that shouted, Hosanna, Lord, save us, and they're the same voices who said, crucify Him. And so we're at that point in Luke's Gospel in the 23rd chapter where Jesus is hanging on the cross, and He's giving His literal life that we might have life. He's offering the very essence of love so that we might experience the powerful gift of everlasting life. And so Jesus is hanging on the cross, and in Luke's gospel, we have an actual conversation between Jesus and the two other criminals hanging on the cross. It's only in the Gospel of Luke. No other gospel records this conversation. It's absolutely fascinating. And it goes something like this. Luke chapter 23, verses 39 to 43. It says, one of the criminals hanging alongside cursed him. Some Messiah you are. Save yourself. Save us. But the other one made him shut up. Have you no fear of God? You're getting the same as him. We deserve this, but not him. He did nothing to deserve this. And then the criminal turned to Jesus and said, Jesus, remember me when you enter your kingdom. And Jesus said, don't worry, I will. Today, you will join me in paradise. Now that story is so powerful because of the dual nature of the generosity that's going on. I mean, Jesus is offering his life for the world. And there are two criminals. I make up one on either side, of course, and one of those criminals, they're just hanging out. One chooses selfishness. Save us, man. Would you work this out for us? Would you make this happen? Save yourself, by gosh. One of them chooses selfishness. But one of them, he chooses generosity. It's a simple conversation, but as he hangs on the cross, he chooses generous conversation and a generous offer to Jesus. Just through something that he said, just through being who he was. I reckon he chose generosity, this other criminal, because he was grateful for Jesus. Now look, what he said was very simple. He just said, look, you deserve this, I deserve this, but this guy, he does not deserve this. He did nothing wrong. It's simply a generous comment. It's a way of acknowledging how grateful this man is for what it is Jesus is offering. So his generosity began out of gratefulness. I'm grateful, Jesus, you're doing this. I'm grateful that you're paying the price. I'm grateful, Jesus, that this is happening. Even though it's happening to you, I'm grateful that you're doing it. He makes a generous comment. And then he asks a question that's generated out of trust. Jesus, will you remember me? Will you remember me when you come into your kingdom? See, he moved from gratitude and offered generosity, and because of the generosity, he moved to trust. I trust that Jesus is going to do something for me. I trust that God's got something for me. And indeed, Jesus did, didn't he? Jesus said, I will. I'll remember you. And so that man's generous comment, that man's generous spirit, that criminal's desire to be generous with his thoughts and his words and his actions, it gained him paradise. And it was a gift. But I reckon there's a bigger truth even than that. Jesus died for both of them. He died for both criminals, didn't he? He died for all of us, didn't he? He died for all sinners. It's the ultimate in generosity. That's the powerful gift of the cross. But it reminds me that we can be generous just like Jesus. We may not have to lay our lives on the line. We may not have to die on the cross, but we can easily be grateful for life. And because of that, turn toward generosity that allows us to become even more generous simply because we trust that God will provide for us. So we can trust that God's got a bigger picture for us. And so I want to suggest that we too can be generous, just like this man hanging on the cross. We can be generous with our time. We can be generous with our talents. We can be generous with our dollars. And I'm convinced it comes out of gratitude and trust. There's another story. Paul talks to us about it in Corinthians. It's in the second letter to the Corinthian church. And Paul is lifting up to the Corinthian Christians, the Macedonian followers of Jesus. And he lifts up a powerful image of both gratitude and trust. And this is what he says, 2 Corinthians chapter 8. They are being tested by many troubles, meaning the Macedonians. And they are very poor, but they are also filled with an abundant joy, which is overflowed in rich generosity. For I can testify that they gave not only what they could afford, but far more. And they did it of their own free will. See, the Macedonians were grateful for what Jesus had done. They were grateful for what Paul had taught, and they were willing to trust God with their lives in order to support the main church in Jerusalem. I wonder, during this season when it feels almost natural to be selfish, take care of myself, go do my own thing, be my own person, socially distance myself, when it seems natural to just turn to self, man, I think this is the time to practice the spiritual discipline of generosity that's based in gratitude and follows after trust. Man, I just think that there are all kinds of ways we can do it, and our church is doing it. I mean, we've established what we're calling in the meantime action teams. And you can touch base with Dana Flock and her email. It'll be there on the screen for you. And you can do any number of things. You can reach out to some of our church members by phone call or by prayer. You can offer to go shop or run errands for folks. You can virtually communicate and connect with people. You can help folks that need a loving hand or a caring heart. Just contact Dana and she will set you up to be a part of those action teams. That's a generous spirit out of your gratitude to God. You could perhaps participate with the Love Packs. We've made a huge commitment to be a part of the Love Packs ministry through Louisville ISD that helps send food to children who would normally get it during school time, who would normally get it during free and reduced lunches. But of course, when they're not in school, they don't have it. So just check out the website that's there on the screen, and you could be generous because you're grateful. And you could trust God in and through that generosity. You could also participate with CCA. We, of course, have had a 30-plus year history with CCA and partnership with them. And so go to the website that's there on the screen for you and connect with them. They're distributing food every single day. They're helping people out every single day. And as their partners, we want to be generous with our time and with our talent. We want to make sure that we're serving other people because it's a high value for us here at Trietsch. We want to demonstrate radical love because we value that as well. See, all of that's about generosity. Generosity that comes from gratitude and is engendered by trust. Friends, you could be generous with your dollars. You have been so very generous over these last few weeks in the difficult times by making your online contributions and bringing your checks by or mailing your checks in. I want to thank you for that. You've gone above and beyond with your commitment to Mozambique to make that a possible ministry that continues for decades to come. You see, it's an interesting time, isn't it? It's a time when we're often feeling lonely and isolated. It's a time when we, unfortunately, have sometimes turned to ourselves, and it's almost easy not to be grateful. Oh, gosh, I can't do this anymore, or I can't get that anymore, I can't go to dinner anymore, or I can't go see my friends anymore. It's easy not to be grateful. But I want to suggest for followers of Jesus, we don't need to take the easy road. We need to take the right road. And a part of that right road is gratitude. Man, I'm grateful that I have my family or my friends. I'm grateful that I have this home. I'm grateful that I have a meal on the table. I'm grateful that I have the internet, or I'm grateful that I can watch shows. Whatever you can be grateful for, be grateful for it. And then, because of that, offer yourself to somebody. Be generous. Be generous in your comments. Be generous in your behavior. Be generous with your dollars. Be generous because that spiritual practice, it claims a trust in the God who gave all, in the God who gave life so that we might have life. I want to challenge you this week. Find a way to be grateful. And because of that gratitude, become generous. And allow that generosity to engender trust within you that God will provide whatever you might not think you would lose, or that God will help you discover what it is you think you might lose by being generous, whether it was your time or your energy or whatever. And then recognize that just like the man who hung on the cross right by Jesus, that his generosity, it gained him paradise. It gained him an amazing, everlasting life with Jesus. My hunch is that your spiritual practice of generosity will do the same for you and for others. Thanks be to God that we have that opportunity. I pray that you will be generous and that you'll discover generosity in others this week. Will you pray with me? Holy and loving God, thank you that from the very beginning of creation, you were so amazingly generous. You offered us life and all that that comes with. So God, help us in these days of difficult times when we feel as though we can't do or go or be anything or go anywhere. Help us to be grateful, because that gratitude leads to an opportunity to be generous with our time, with our talent, or even, yes, God, with our treasures. So help us, Lord, to trust you enough that that can be so, and that we can indeed be generous with all of our lives, because you first set that course for us and you allowed us to do it for others. Thanks be to God. In Jesus' name.